Good morning. Welcome to the February 7th meeting of the Montgomery County House Delegation. Today we have two special guest presentations, starting with Congressman Glenn Ivey, and then we'll be hearing from Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. And then we do have bills that have been reported out, a number of bills that have been reported out by our local committees. So we will start our agenda today with Congressman Ivey, if he is ready.
He'll coming.
Okay, and I apologize, and I had just texted his office to say that we were running a moment late, so we'll take a moment. My apologies, Congressman.
There we go.
Wonderful. So glad you could be with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Okay, yeah. So thanks for having me today. I appreciate the chance to come and have a conversation with you. Obviously, these are crazy times on Capitol Hill right now, so there's a lot going on to keep us busy and a lot to impact certainly the metropolitan area. The attack on government employees has just been horrific. You all may be getting calls about it as well, but the Schedule F, now called Schedule PC, which is sort of a general attack on all federal employees by trying to redesignate them so they don't have the rights that federal government employees have, and they can be treated as at-will employees. They're right now the so-called fork in the road, which looks a lot more like a cul-de-sac to me, looks more like a dead end, but there's that pending as well. And there's a variety of things where they're going into agencies, going through people's personnel files. There's enemies lists that are being put together, like at the FBI and other places. I think the upside, to an extent there is one right now, there's a lot of pushback in the courts. The unions, advocacy groups, just individual attorneys have come together. Congress has been, Democrats in Congress anyway, have been supportive of these efforts. They've filed roughly around 30 lawsuits, I think, and they've won injunctions. I think so far, every place where they've requested an injunction, one has been granted or not, at least not denied. So, the batting average is very good in this whack-a-mole scenario. I think one of the challenges we're having right now is federal employees, they don't know all of their rights. The fork in the road proposal, I think, confused a lot of people. We just did a teleconference town hall last night. It's our second one. We got another 16,000 plus again. A lot of people are confused. Tried to answer questions for them on those, but there's a lot. And some of these issues spill over into very complicated matters from this, like say how would it impact your benefits or your retirement? What retirement rules might apply depending on when you resign or retire? All of those kinds of factors, I think, are, they're going to need individual guidance on, but a lot of the HR departments aren't being super responsive right now. So it's a challenging time, but I've got some hope with respect to the legal challenges being somewhat successful. I think they're slowing down the Trump administration. In fact, I think the buyout move was launched in part because things were going slower than they had hoped with respect to the Schedule F and other efforts to just scare employees into retiring or resigning. So I think that's where that stands. We can talk about some other things too, if you'd like, birthright citizenship and others. But, in my office, that is, issue number 1, 2, and 3. So let me pause for questions or, any kind of feedback you've got, recommendations. This is an all hands on deck moment, and I welcome your thoughts and guidance.
Thank you, Congressman, and thank you for all that you're doing to fight for Marylanders and for democracy. We so appreciate your work. And I will open it up, colleagues, if anyone has any questions or comments. Yes, Delegate Kaufman.
Yes. It's good. Can you hear me, Madam Chair?
Yes.
My question is, I think you represent the people of Burdensville and in the Congress and maybe a little bit more Silver Spring. But what are, other than contacting AFGE and the Treasurers Union, what are resources that we can point constituents to who are struggling in the federal government, or who, some constituents at USAID have been placed on leave or different things like that. So, I mean, right now my heart goes out to those people, obviously, but I don't know what resources to point them to. So should we have them call your or Jamie's district office, depending on where they live, or what resources can we point federal workers to beyond the town halls and things that you've done?
Calling the congressional offices is a good first step. If they want to go direct, depending on what department or agency they are in, starting with the union is probably a good idea. Some departments have multiple unions. Some have very limited union representation, but the unions can provide agency and department specific guidance because some agencies and departments have different rules. And to the extent you've got a union that's got a collective bargaining agreement in place, that can provide additional protections and rights that they should know about so they can assert those. There's advocacy groups. Democracy Forward is a consortium essentially of a variety of groups and unions and private funding that's leading the litigation charge. So I think contacting them makes a lot of sense. In fact, the former head of OPM under Biden was just hired by, just retained by their group. So, and Rob's a great source of information, frank, almost encyclopedic. So I would suggest those three at the top. And I would also encourage them to have, to the extent they can find private counsel. I know that's hard and expensive, but getting some guidance on that front can be helpful. Democracy Forward, I think, is trying to put together essentially sort of a clearinghouse. We've got a lot of retired lawyers in the DC metropolitan area who are anxious to be helpful on this front, and people are trying to, matchmake basically to connect them up so they can get guidance. Because as I mentioned a minute ago, every individual is going to have really, personal and specific circumstances that could impact how they, what decisions they make and how they go about pursuing them. One other point I wanted to make real quick, and we talked about this last night. You've got some people who quote unquote took the deal already, but are having some buyer's remorse. And they should talk to attorneys about that. But I do have concerns that it's not legal. It's not clear to me that the federal government would actually be able to, especially under just an executive order, have people resign but still pay them for the next 6, 7, 8 months. It's essentially a no-show job, and I don't think we do that very often. And special circumstances of settlements, resignation, or retirement things, but I don't think that the broad proposal that they made qualifies under those circumstances. Also, there's questions about whether there's funding to do it anyway, given the fights and challenges we're having on the appropriations process and the CR. And then lastly, on that point, there's major questions about enforceability. If they take the quote unquote deal and the government reneges on that, and would anybody be surprised if Donald Trump reneged on the agreement? What sort of rights or options do you have that you can try and enforce, say, in court? And the answer appears to be not much. So we're encouraging people to be very careful about it. Michelle Singletary in the Washington Post wrote an article about sort of the pros and cons of taking this deal. I think it was on Tuesday. And I've been referring people to that. Her bottom line is don't do it. And that's ours as well. If somebody did do it, though, and is, wants to change their mind, my thought, they should confirm this with counsel, is that they should, try and rescind their resignation, especially if there's no effort or move by the government to accept the agreement. Because then down the road, if you want to try and challenge it as a contract that's essentially illegal, at least you have an additional argument that you were trying to get out of it instead of trying to follow through with it.
Thank you. And if I may, because I don't see any other hands, take a point of personal privilege, Congressman. I think I speak for all my colleagues in saying how much we enjoy serving with Julian. So thank you, Madam Chair.
I'll thank you on Julian's behalf. I appreciate that very much. And I know he's got a lot of respect for you and the work that you're doing as well.
Thank you, Delegate Kaufman. I don't see any other hands, but actually I do have a question for you, Congressman. Is there anything that you can share about what might be forthcoming in terms of federal tax changes? As you know, we're grappling with our state deficit, and I've been very concerned about, anything that might happen at the federal level might further exacerbate our revenues here at the state level. So I don't know if there's any intel that you might be able to share at this point.
Well, I mean, I think the overall direction of the Trump administration is not favorable. The across the board cut of financial funding or federal funding that got blocked by an injunction and then they backed away from it. But that might be a harbinger of things to come. And, so he's trying to find ways to cut as much as he can, using Elon Musk and Doge. And they're not even going to get close to what they want to try and do. But they want to try and use that in two ways. One is to sort of satisfy the Freedom Caucus, which apparently is pushing for between $1 trillion and $2 trillion in cuts in federal spending, which is an astonishing amount given the limited, the limited amount that's left after you go through defense spending and, the Social Security, Medicare, and the like. So that's one approach. The other, though, is it looks like he's going to try and find as much as he can to fund his tax cut. He wants to try and extend the 2017 tax cut, and that's around $4 trillion. So I think they're going to be trying to grab, any kind of dollars that they can find, rob Peter to pay Paul, whatever analogy we want to use. I think that's where it's going to go. And I think there's going to be heavy restrictions on federal funding that we had typically relied on. And you name the program. Take example, shutting down Department of Education. It looks like Title I funding might be at risk. And I know that's used by a lot of states to pay for teacher salaries in, the Title I scenarios. So, and there's, thousands of versions of that across the board. Meals on Wheels, all the things that were put at risk, childcare, I think are going to remain on the chopping block. I think they're going to make another run at that. Some of the funding that I had used to try and help with programs in my district, like say funding for union training programs, I assume those will get cut or limited pretty dramatically as well. So it's going to be a rough year to 2 years, I think, on that front. The only glimmer of hope, I think, is that the House numbers are pretty close, 217 to 215. So it's like a 2-3 person switch. And we could have majorities, under Hakeem Jeffries' guidance on some of these votes coming up. The big stretch is going to come roughly in March. We'll get a budget resolution that tells us what the top line numbers are supposed to be. I don't know if they're going to be able, the Republicans are going to be able to reach bicameral agreement on that. So I'm not sure how they're going to go forward on that front. But to the extent they do, we'll get to the CR process or some sort of spending bill votes. But I'm not clear on how they're going to try and get through this. And frankly, I don't think Johnson's up to the task. He's really struggling to manage his caucus and deal with Trump at the same time. So, I think in the short run, if, to the extent we've been running programs that rely heavily on federal funding, and especially if he can parse out funding that's going to blue states more heavily than red states, it's going to be at risk. To the extent we can beat it back, it'll be based on the need for these programs across the board, across the country. And I'm encouraging people to reach out to especially to the extent they have, programs that are functioning in red states. I'll give you an example of Medical Care Group came through yesterday that does a lot of work in Maryland, but relies heavily on federal funding to do it. And I said, hey, to the extent you've got, agencies, departments or whatever in red states, you should be having them call their red members of Congress and senators, and in some instances, governors, say like Virginia, for example, who can have conversations with the Trump administration and encourage them to back away from these kinds of cuts.
Thank you. And for our last question, Delegate Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Congressman, for joining us today. Um, during the presidential campaign, Trump was very clear about some things that he was going to do, and on other things, there is ambiguity. And one of those ambiguous things was abortion. And so I get the sense that he's not particularly personally passionate about this issue. And that, now he considers it a state issue. He's indicated he's not supportive of a national ban, but there's been legislation introduced in the House for a federal ban on abortion. And the language is a little bit murky too. Like people are saying national standards and reasonable restrictions. The wording that's being used is changing. And so I'm wondering if you can give us any insights on how credible you think that legislation is. Is it something that you see your colleagues on the other side of the aisle supporting? And do you think it would actually make it into law?
Great question. I mean, I think there's going to be a big push actually by a relatively large group of Republicans, certainly in the House, to move with a national ban of one type or another. I don't know that that's going to pass. In fact, I think you'd have significant defections in the Republican caucus. There's a lot of House seats that are held by Republicans in districts where Harris actually got a larger percentage of the vote. I know they think that they're at risk, and I think they're right. And the DCCC is certainly targeting, roughly the top 20 to 50 of those, 20 to 25 of those with $50 million early on for independent expenditure ads and the like. If they stick their head up on something like that, I think that's definitely something we'd go after them about. Now, I agree about Trump. I think strategically, it's not only, not a big, agenda item for him, but I think he would view it as getting in the way of the things he's trying to do overall, primarily the tax cut. So I'd be surprised if they tried to move something like that, certainly in the first to second quarter of this year. But after you get past that, I think I'd expect to see a lot more of these sort of, social kind of bills that are aimed at, more red meat to the MAGA base, other than the easy executive orders that they've done, like the attack on transgender kids, which is just pathetic, but it was low hanging fruit, I think, from their perspective. And, he did an EO on it yesterday or 2 days ago. I think we'll see more of that kind of stuff. Abortion's more of a third rail, though, I think, for a lot of them. And I think you'd have a lot of senators who would be reluctant to walk down that path. But, we'll have to see. They may also be reliant on just waiting to see what the judiciary does, because to the extent this stuff bubbles up to the Supreme Court, God only knows what those guys will do with, more efforts to sort of shave back on access to abortion or any reproductive rights for that matter. I think we'll just have to see how that plays out.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all for the work you're doing. If you don't have any more questions, I'm happy to take more if you do, but I know that talking to Julian and, Jolene's living this from the county level too. These are rough times, I think, at every level of government. The austerity issues that you all are dealing with down there. I had a chance to talk to Wes a little bit yesterday. You got a lot of heavy lifting to do, but I know you're up to the task. And I do want to thank you too, because in this time period where Congress is, from a standpoint of Democratic leadership, we're really not able to move the agenda forward in a way that we'd like to. But Maryland, based on the work that you're doing, continues to be a real leader nationally and in moving forward on a strong progressive agenda. Thank you for that and encourage you to keep it up.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you for being with us today and for your work.
Thanks so much. Have a great day. Keep up the good work.
Okay, next we will turn to the next item on our agenda. We have a briefing by Park and Planning, and I see that the Montgomery County Planning Board Chair, Artie Harris, is here, and I will turn it over to you and to your colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you and good morning. I'm Artie Harris, Chair of the Montgomery County Planning Board, Chair Palakovich Carr, and members of the delegation. Thank you for having us here this morning. We are honored to be able to provide this annual update of some of the work we're doing at Montgomery Parks and Planning. Our teams have been very busy over the year on behalf of our constituents. In a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Directors Jason Sartori and Mitty Figueredo to share some of the critical areas we have been focusing on, especially housing and equitable engagement. However, before I do that, I want to take a moment and highlight one program from each department. Within Parks, I was very excited to visit our wood recycling program housed at Pope Farm. This program grew out of staff identifying an opportunity for a more efficient, economical, and sustainable use of our resources. Before this program, Parks was spending over $150,000 in transfer fees annually to dispose of trees that fell or needed to be removed from our system. We were also purchasing compost, mulch, and other wood products for use in our parks. Now, all trees removed from parks are 100% recycled or repurposed. Branches and leaves are used for wood chips, mulch, and organic compost. Trunks are milled into lumber to make tree and garden stake, truck boards, furniture, including park benches and tables, and firewood for park events, nature centers, and campgrounds. Excess wood is sold at our annual wood sale for others to use. Last year alone, the program was able to produce almost $300,000 worth of mulch, compost, wood chips, and lumber. To me, this project is a perfect highlight of the innovation and passion that our park staff brings to their work each day, with a focus on delivering more sustainable services to our community. This program allows us to return to our park system almost $500,000 of value from what others would have seen as waste. Turning over to planning, I want to highlight the importance of the incentive zoning policy that we forwarded to Council last year. This policy recommendation will update the public benefits point system used for development in commercial, residential, and employment zones. Currently, the incentive zoning system provides developers with an extensive list of public benefits and amenities that they can pick and choose from to reach a minimum points threshold. This could include anything from small-scale wayfinding signs to a large public park. The updates we are moving forward realign the point system with the policy priorities of Thrive Montgomery 2050, our new general plan, and the county's climate action plan, ensuring that new development will provide the amenities we need throughout the county. The changes streamline the amenity options into 4 categories: housing for all, environmental resilience, infrastructure for compact growth, and complete communities. We have also recommended to shifting the system from a points-based scorecard to a more direct and proportional density-based evaluation of the public benefits being provided. We are currently working with the council on the zoning text amendment to codify these changes. I highlighted these 2 projects as both embody to me the dedication of our staff to support Montgomery County residents in all aspects of day-to-day living. I want to turn it over to Planning Director Jason Sartori to focus in on housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Artie, and good morning, members of the delegation. I'm Jason Sartori. I'm a proud 23-year resident of Montgomery County and honored to serve as our county's planning director. My wife and I bought our first home when we moved to the Forest Glen neighborhood in 2002. And as I'm sure many of you do, I feel immensely privileged to live in this great county and be able to own a home here. I wanted to start this morning by talking about housing and highlighting just how difficult it is today to become a first-time homeowner in Montgomery County. Since 2000, housing prices have drastically outpaced inflation and growth in income. For example, in zip code 20912, which is Tacoma Park, the value of the typical single-family home in 2000 was just under $204,000. Had home values in Tacoma Park simply increased at the rate of inflation since 2000, the typical home today, or really in 2023, would be valued at just under $361,000. 68% of county households in 2023 could comfortably afford a home at that price. But in reality, home values far outpaced inflation, meaning that the typical home in Tacoma Park today is valued at more than $701,000, which is only comfortably affordable to 41% of county households. But Tacoma Park is not alone. We've seen similar increases in the cost of homes in every single neighborhood in the county. It's important to note that what is driving this is a lack of supply in the face of increasing demand for housing. Our population is growing, but the county's average household size has also fallen by a whole person over the last 60 years, meaning we would need more housing units today, even if our population were not growing. In particular, we need more housing that is affordable to middle-income households, which explains what you see in this graph, that our middle-income population has fallen by 26,000 residents in recent years. This is not sustainable or emblematic of a healthy, thriving housing or economic environment. To illustrate the history and geography of housing development in Montgomery County since 1940, Planning's GIS team created a public web map. This map shows how housing is spread across the county over time and the relationship between land availability and development trends. It breaks housing down by three types: single-family detached homes shown in lilac, townhomes in dark blue, and units in multifamily buildings shown in gold. And you can see the map advancing through the decades here. If you would like to view this at your own pace, you can scan the QR code on the slide to visit the story map online. As time passes, you see the growth spread out. You can see the share of units changing in the bar chart as well. In 1940, single-family detached homes made up 92% of our housing stock. Today, they're only 46% of the county's housing stock. However, as you can see in this map, single-family homes continue to take up more than 90% of the land area dedicated to residential uses in the county. You may have noticed other elements change over time: the Beltway, the Red Line, the introduction of the Ag Reserve, which is not only shown here in the green line, but also very clearly defined in our development pattern. Housing production and policy are a major priority of the Planning Board and the Planning Department, as I know it is also for the Moore administration and for the state legislature. Many of you are familiar with the work that we've done over the last few years on our Attainable Housing Strategies initiative. This resulted in the Planning Board sending recommendations to the County Council last year on how to incorporate more diverse housing types in more parts of the county. Just this week, the County Council introduced the More Housing Now package, which includes 5 key elements that were in part inspired by our efforts and the engagement that occurred around attainable housing. Speaking of engagement, it's a cornerstone of the planning process, and I'm proud to highlight the extraordinary outreach done by the Planning Department. Under the guidance of our State of the Practice Equitable Engagement Guide, we take an audience-focused approach to engagement. That means holding meetings in neighborhoods. And you can see in the bottom, the photo in the bottom right corner is one of more than 20 meetings, including multiple that we had completely in Spanish, that were held for our University Boulevard Corridor Plan. But our engagement goes beyond community meetings. We strive to meet the community where they are by canvassing door to door and participating in local activities, festivals, and street fairs. For example, the picture on the left is from the Long Branch Festival last year, where our team that's working on the Eastern Silver Spring Communities Plan had discussions with neighbors about the future of their community. This past October, our Up-County Planning Division hosted the Damascus Placemaking Festival, which reimagined a stretch of Main Street in Damascus as a shared space for the community. Our team of planning staff, consultants, and community members transformed roughly 40,000 square feet of right-of-way and parking areas along Main Street. We brought in 51 vendors and community organizations. We installed 190 linear feet of flag banners, 2,500 linear feet of pavement chalk, and a 250 square foot mural. We set up 28 trees and 180 potted plants, and we constructed 10 temporary benches. The festival inspired many conversations about the future of Damascus, including how we can enhance bike and pedestrian connectivity, commissioning a mural, and exploring the future use of the Druid Theater. We are hopeful that we can continue to engage communities throughout the county on efforts just like this to collectively envision how we can better interact with our built environment to strengthen the social fabric of our communities. I'm also happy to highlight another community engagement effort that I'm really excited about. The County Council funded the Community Planning Academy in our FY25 budget, and we've been making a lot of progress on the program. which is focused on empowering more stakeholders from across the county with the knowledge and the resources that they need to fully engage and advocate for themselves and their communities throughout our various planning processes. Our sister department, Prince George's Planning, launched their neighborhood planning academy a couple of years ago and has found great success with this. And so we've been able to learn from their experience in preparing our program. Our academy will be an online module-based program with opportunities for in-person touch points with planning staff. The intention is really to open this up to as many residents as possible. We are currently working with our partners at DPS and MCDOT to finalize the course curriculum. And we're also working in consultation with the county's Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice. And we're on schedule to kick off with a beta test group in June. So really excited about that. You may recall that the creation of the Planning Academy was a recommendation from the Development and Review Process Work Group. Earlier this week, we sent an update to you all highlighting the progress that we've made on the work group's recommendations. That progress is summarized on this slide, and I'd be happy to talk about any of this during Q&A. One recently implemented recommendation that you may have noticed while out and about in the county is our new development application signage. The image on this slide is an example of the new template already in use. The signage features a rendering of the project, highlights key facts, and includes a QR code so interested parties can see the full details of the proposed development. This sign advances the transparency of our work, and we hope it will bring more residents into the planning process. And with that, I will now hand things over to Mitty to talk about parks. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason, and good morning. I'm also happy to be before you today on behalf of Montgomery Parks to highlight a few of the ways that we emphasize equity and engagement in our work. And later in this presentation, I'm also going to talk a little bit about Wheaton Regional Park and why it's our top countywide parks priority. But before I get started, just for a little context, I wanted to share a few numbers about the scope and scale of the Montgomery Park system. We have 419 parks across 37,000 acres. We own 11% of the land in the county. That makes us the largest single property owner. We have nearly 900 miles of park boundary. That's the distance from here to Memphis, Tennessee. And this matters because these park boundaries delineate parkland that we hold in stewardship for the benefit of the public. And it's a lot to monitor all those park boundaries. We also have 600 linear miles of streams. And at that distance, you could swim to Portland, Maine from here. We have hundreds of athletic fields, hundreds of basketball courts, tennis courts, playgrounds. We have 55 pickleball courts, more than 275 miles of trails, more than 100 historic structures, as well as dog parks, skate parks, bike parks, one Tai Chi court. And this is just naming some of our many amenities and maintaining all of that in a way that serves the high expectations of our more than 1 million residents does take a lot of effort and resources. So equity is a consideration in everything we do at parks. And for us, that means focusing on what we're building and where we're building it. Who are we talking to, and how can we make sure that we consider input from people who don't normally make it their business to proactively come to us? Who are we serving? Our park programs need to be accessible and inclusive for all residents of every race, background, and income level. And our data shows that we also need to focus on serving seniors, teenagers, and working age adults, and of course, people with disabilities. At any given time, the Parks Department has about 350 projects in some phase of planning, design, or construction. And we use the Community Equity Index tool that was developed by our partners at the Planning Department to make sure that we're doing this equitably. Our parkland is very well distributed across the county, but that's not enough. There are communities that for historical reasons do need more attention. I have a couple of pictures here of park projects that are in areas that are identified as high need, Columbia Local Park and Strathmore. Over the last few years, the Parks Department has transformed how we engage with the public. While in-person public meetings can be a useful tool, they're usually not broadly representative. So while, of course, we always have to calibrate the level of outreach to the scope of the project, because as I mentioned earlier, we have hundreds of projects underway at any given time. We have really put a lot of effort into equitable engagement. And the Long Branch Parks Initiative is a great example. For this project, to find out what the community was interested in and needed, we did in-park and online surveys. We had door-to-door canvassing, stakeholder groups, all of which resulted in a sampling of respondents that very closely mirrored the demographic makeup of the community. And this is very hard to accomplish. Once we've done the initial outreach, we incorporate that data into our planning process, along with things like existing conditions, transportation access, and a level of service analysis so that we can find opportunities to incorporate amenities that we need more of countywide, like dog parks, pickleball, and sports courts. Then we develop and share recommendations before moving on to final design and construction. Equity also factors into our programming decisions, and here you can see some examples. We have our Trails Ambassadors, which is part of our Roots to Rocks program geared towards kids who might not otherwise be exposed to our parks trails or to mountain biking. After all, one of our parks goals is to get kids off the couch, to have them put down their phones and go outside and get some exercise. We have adaptive mountain biking, where we've partnered with More to make sure that people with disabilities also have access to our trails. And not pictured here, for example, we also have adaptive kayaking because we believe that outdoor exercise is for everyone. We have senior programming like our Montgomery Explorers program, which gets seniors outside walking around in our parks. And we have acoustics and ales, which, while it's not specifically geared towards socioeconomically disadvantaged or underrepresented groups, gives people a fun opportunity to gather with friends and families in our parks and provides programming that's of interest to a group that we're better trying to serve, which is young and working age adults. All of these things come together in the 2022 Wheaton Regional Park Master Plan, which made recommendations for improvements to this 60-year-old park based on extensive community engagement and outreach. Wheaton's Montgomery County's regional park next door, and it offers recreational opportunities for the surrounding communities while also serving the entire county. This is the county's only urban regional park with over 200,000 residents living within 2 miles of the park. The community is very diverse. Nearly 75% of them are non-white, and nearly 50% speak a language other than English at home. So outreach and community engagement for the plan really had to be robust and comprehensive. We did community engagement over a more than 2-year period and used multiple ways to meet the communities where they're at. Many of these strategies and tactics we also used in the Long Branch Plan. And ultimately, after years of engagement and planning, the master plan, approved by the planning board, recommended dozens of projects and improvements to this park, including biking and walking improvements to the park and trail systems, a new dog park and community garden, sport court renovations, wayfinding signage. But probably the most notable recommendation in the plan is for the Action Sports Park. We had heard from the public that Wheaton Regional Park was lacking a skate park, and we also heard a desire to activate the park with active sports and places for social connection, especially for teenagers, working age adults, and families. And this is also consistent with the findings of our PROS plan. And one of the first things we've been able to execute from the Wheaton Regional Park Master Plan is renovating all of our natural surface trails in the park and adding this new amenity that you see pictured here on the day of the ribbon cutting, which is the new Wheaton Regional Park Gravity Bike Park. It features a downhill mountain biking track with some easy and challenging lines so that beginners and more advanced riders can use it. And since it opened, we've received so much positive feedback from people who live near the park, but frankly, also people who are coming from even outside Montgomery County to visit it. So now I want to flip back to the Wheaton Action Sports Park for a minute. We've continued to engage with the community to solicit feedback on a couple of design concepts for the park. The community expressed a preference for concept 2, which is pictured on the left side of the screen. We are going to continue concept development over the course of the next year with an anticipated detailed design that we will share in 2026. And as an aside, our communications team recently won an award for a video that we did to promote this project that you might have seen on social media. We did receive a big increase in funding from the County Council and our capital improvements program last year, but we are still about $5 million short of funding that we need in order to implement this project. And we're also in the process of pursuing state funding. We've requested $1.5 million in a state grant, and we very much hope to have your support on this as well. So thank you for the opportunity to address you. And with that, I will hand it back to the chair.
Thank you, Mitty and Jason, for sharing these highlights of your department's work. As we have limited time with all of you this morning, we're only able to provide a high-level glimpse of our work. But I wanted to highlight here and on the next two slides just some of the major projects and initiatives happening in your districts. While many of our projects are district-specific, they impact residents countywide. For example, just last month, we hosted a public hearing at the Up-County Regional Services Center in Germantown. This gave us a chance to hear from the community in the community on the master plan of highways and transitways. We are committed to continuing to engage residents where they are. In addition to all of these projects, we have a strong research division that has looked at and analyzed demographics, various employment sectors, and more. If there is specific information you are looking for about your district or connected to legislation you may propose, please don't hesitate to reach out. We love the opportunity to share our research in the community. We are so proud of the many projects we have active in the county. And while we only have time to list them here, we would be more than happy to meet with you and talk more in detail about any of these projects or provide you with additional information. Thank you so much for your support of our work. We are so proud to be helping to spur investment in the county and make Montgomery County a great place to live, work, play, and thrive. We are happy to take any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Colleagues, will open it up for questions. If you want to use the virtual raise hand function, just speak up if you'd like to be recognized. Delegate Lopez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for joining us this morning. One thing that I want, this is kind of like a isn't it so question, but thank you for showcasing the ongoing work from the development work group. Isn't it so that one of the local delegation bills we passed last year about the modernization of plat recordation has now become the model for what the respective state agency is going to do? And shouldn't we feel proud that we were leading on that issue, as relatively mundane as it might seem?
Thank you so much for bringing it up, and thank you for your support in making that happen. Yeah.
Yes, isn't it so? It is so.
Recognizing Delegate Corman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason or Chair Harris, you may not know the answer to this, but looking at the zoning text amendment from the council members that, is a further iteration of the affordable, attainable housing strategies. One question I've received from constituents is the properties have to be fronting the transit corridors, but the question has been raised of could two properties be put together where one is not currently fronting the transit corridor, right? So I'm not talking about two properties both fronting, I'll just say Wisconsin Avenue to make it easy. But one is fronting Wisconsin Avenue, one is interior to the neighborhood. They are both purchased. Would the ZTA apply to both of those properties? And again, I appreciate that you are not the author of the ZTA, but I know you are on top of these things, so I'm asking anyway.
Sure. So yes, as currently written, it would allow the assemblage of properties. The one thing I would point out is that you refer to transit corridors. The way that they've identified the street segments this would apply to didn't necessarily require it being a transit corridor. It's based on the width of the right of way and the classification of the road, and so it includes some streets that are not necessarily transit corridors.
Thank you for that clarification, and both on the assemblage piece and correcting me on the transit corridors. I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Corman. Colleagues, any other questions? Delegate Chi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, the colleagues from the Planning Board and Department. My question is about the controversy, so to speak, surrounding the proposed Attainable Housing Strategies Initiative. Could you enlighten my colleagues and all of us about what this is all about? Because we have been reading some of the things, including some council members' opposition or concerns from the community. And overall, I think it's a great thing that we want to build more middle housing. But if you could just elaborate a little bit on that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Why don't I just start, and Jason could. So we are currently analyzing what the council has sponsored, and Jason and his group. But I will say is that I believe that the sponsors are positively reacting to many of the comments that the residents had when we put out the board's attainable housing. So that what's out there today is that there will be no change within a community. Right, like before, what the board had put out, and we think it's still a good idea, is to have within a community, within a neighborhood, all our 40, 60, 90 properties in a certain area as we would be affected by opening up a single family zoning to a duplex, triplex, or quad. But the current proposal is that it's only along quarters, so it won't be within the community. It's only along quarters. What the sponsorships have now focused on mainly, it's on like workforce housing, and there's also like 25% of all the units would have to be at least one would be a workforce. So between affordable to residents, between up to 120 the area median income, so it goes somewhere between 80 and 120. So they were listening to folks that said this is really not affordable housing. So this is what the sponsors came out. This is workforce housing. So what I feel is that, and what the sponsors feel is that they were listening to the community. And so it's only on the quarters. So it's not within the community. It is more affordable. And so it's workforce housing, but the details Jason and his group are working on, and he can talk more about that. But we think that what the council came out with, the sponsor, is responsive to what many of the residents were saying.
Yeah, and I would just say, I think that you explained that quite well. We are, as already mentioned, we're reviewing the legislation now. So I don't want to get too far ahead of our team in that, but I think it really was something that was inspired by the work that we did, but certainly responsive to the concerns and the comments that council members heard over the last several months from the community.
Thank you. Last chance, colleagues. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we appreciate the presentation today, and I'll just add, personally, I have appreciated that Chair Harris and your colleagues have been very available as we've had several bills working their way through the local committee process, and you've been part of those work sessions and have been available to answer questions. So just appreciative of that. All right, we will thank you all and move on to the next part of our agenda. So colleagues, we do have a number of bills that have come out of our local committees in the last week or so. We're going to start with the Economic Development Committee. They have 3 bills to report out. Turning it over to Chair Foley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have 3 bills that we're considering today that have been worked on and voted out of our committee. And I want to thank the committee for their hard work. We are almost done, and we're just waiting on a bill from Prince George's County. A bi-county bill from Prince George's County. So let's start with 18-25. And there is an amendment to this bill. And so let me explain what the bill does. First, the bill increases the number of a Class BD-BWL liquor license that the same person may hold from 1 to 2. And the bill also limits the holder of a second-class BWL license to the on-premise sale of beer, wine, and liquor. And only private label products can be sold off premises. It's a little complicated. And by the way, I misspoke. There's not an amendment to this bill. It's a little complicated, but it basically allows an establishment to have, two licenses for both of their establishments. So with that said, I move the bill. And there's a seconded by Delegate Wims. And so now the bill is open for discussion. Is there any discussion on this bill?
And actually, Chair Foley, I'll preside over this part. So
Oh,
yes,
sorry, I'm sorry.
No
Go ahead.
worries, no worries. Any questions or conversation on MC 18-25? Okay, seeing none. Oh, yes, Delegate Chi.
Yeah, just for clarification, could either the committee chair or the bill sponsor explain what kind of establishment? Are we talking about restaurants, or retailers?
I don't know if Delegate Vogel is on the call. Oh, he is.
He is here.
Yeah, okay.
I'm here. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Delegate, for the question. It is for a very specific model. The BWL license is fairly new. It was first created in 2016. So this is the first instance where a restaurant is running into the problem of needing a second license. But we have a restaurant hoping to open in Montgomery County with a very specific restaurant and retail model that is unable to do so given the existing limitation.
Does that answer your question, Delegate Chi?
Somewhat. Thank you.
And Chair Foley, do you have any additional information that you might offer? Because I'll recognize and I'll sympathize here, Delegate Chi. I know with these alcohol licenses, this gets very in the weeds very quickly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I don't have anything to add to what Delegate Vogel said. I mean, he understands the bill much better than I do. But I think that, I mean, this is to take care of a, specific kind of restaurant arrangement, I'll say.
Yeah.
I'm sure the question.
I do stress that it does mostly have to do with private label, their own products, and premises consumption of those. So I just make that point.
Madam Chair, if I can just clarify one point
Please.
there to get a little more specific. So on premise under this new license, the second license on premise, restaurants would be able to sell beer, wine, and liquor. And off premise, they would only be with the second license off premise, they would only be able to sell their own private label products.
Thank you, Delegate Vogel. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of MC 18-25, please say aye or raise your hand. And actually, sorry, I skipped for the first bill. If you're not on camera, please come on camera at this time if you want to be recorded. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, anyone opposed? That bill passes unanimously. Chair Foley, back to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, the next bill we have is 1525. And what this bill does is it requires the Department of Commerce to study the tourist and visitor economy of the Montgomery County Ag Reserve to identify barriers of growth and develop policies and recommendation to help the reserve support small businesses, recreation sites, and historic sites that depend on visitors to the Ag Reserve. This comes out of, let me just say that the study, the Department of Commerce may consult with other agencies or organizations and stakeholders to complete the study. So I don't think this bill necessarily contemplates that the Commerce Department does the study itself, but more that it kind of coordinates the study. This came out of a meeting, a symposium a couple years ago in the Ag Reserve with members of the County Council and other stakeholders about business there. There are some amendments And the amendments, in a second, I'll ask Delegate Chi to explain the amendments, but first, I'd like to move the amendments so we can discuss them. So I move the amendments.
Is there a second?
Second,
Okay, moved by Delegate Foley, seconded by, we'll say Delegate Kaufman, since there were multiple. And Delegate Chi, would you like to walk through what the amendments are briefly? And you're on mute.
Apologize. Yes, the amendment is mostly technical to better define the partners that the Department of Commerce would collaborate with to collect the data, and exactly what kind of data we're looking for, and some methodology, and just basically fine tune the original framework of the study as we spoke with more potential partners that have the kind of original sources of data, so that we better define them. And we had multiple Zoom calls and conversations with these partners. So as the Delegate Chair Foley indicated, this is not to put a burden entirely of the study on the Department of Commerce, but rather make sure the Commerce acts as a conduit to identify the origins of these data sources and to pull it together to make it workable for Western Montgomery and the agri-reserve communities.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion on the amendments? Okay, again, please be on camera if you wish to be recorded. All those in favor of the amendment say aye or raise your hand.
aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, the amendments are adopted unanimously. Is there any further amendments? Okay, is there a motion on the bill as amended?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Delegate Kaufman, seconded by Delegate Foley. Any discussion on the bill as amended? All right, all those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that bill also passes unanimously. Chair Foley, for your last bill, please. And I'm sorry. Oh, there you go.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So the next bill that we have reported out is a bi-county bill. It's MCPG 107-25, Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission System Development Charge Exemptions. This is a complicated bill. And let me just stress that it does just involve Montgomery County, even though it is a bi-county bill, because the WSSC is a bi-county organization, but it just affects Montgomery County. And it makes mandatory rather than discretionary for the Montgomery County Council to grant certain exceptions to the system development charge for properties located in Montgomery County. The bill also requires Montgomery County to approve applications for certain exemptions on a first-come, first-served basis up to a certain limit, and authorizes persons who are not property owners to apply for an exemption. And then it also requires the county to report to the delegation regarding the exemption process. My understanding from the sponsor is that this is, and I think this is what was presented in the hearing, that this was to help organizations like daycare centers to access some of this money. Let me stress there's no fiscal note because the money is there and it isn't used. We had quite a bit of discussion about this bill in our committee, and there are amendments. So I would like to move the amendments for purposes of discussion. Move the amendments.
Second.
Okay, amendments moved by Delegate Foley, Chair Foley, seconded by Delegate Kaiser, and I do see Delegate Kaufman has a question. Please go ahead.
I do, but I'll wait because I have a question on the bill, so I'll wait till we discuss the bill.
Okay, that sounds good. Questions on the amendments or discussion of the amendments? Yes, Chair Foley.
Madam Chair, if I could, maybe I could call on Delegate Moon to explain the how the amendments change this bill and what where we are with, and what this bill actually does. He really can explain it much better than I can. So if that's all right with you to call on him, thank you.
Yes, that'd be fine. I will turn to our bill sponsor.
Thank you, colleagues. The amendment is actually pretty straightforward. I think there's a reporting aspect to this bill. Basically, after talking to WSSC and the relevant county agencies about how we can better make sure that the eligible entities, childcare centers, developmental disability, and such get this funding that we intended. There's a lot of WSSC is changing the application website that they have. The county licensing agencies are going to try and update their forms to let eligible applicants who are applying for county licenses know that these exemptions exist. And rather than codify all of that administrative process, we figured it would just be easier to have the county report to the delegation on who's getting the exemptions every year, so that if people continue to not get them, it'll raise a red flag for us, hopefully, and we can continue to make adjustments. And so the amendment here is just language the county requested to the reporting elements so that they thought it worked for them. So that's all that is. And as you hear about a lot of the, as you read through the rest of the bill, and the chair is right, this looks complicated, you should know our goal has actually been to write the law to reflect how the county actually does it. So what you're seeing here is trying to capture how it actually works, because the way it was written was implying a deliberative grant process that actually doesn't exist at all. It's just whoever shows up and is eligible for the money right now gets it. And there's millions left over. So there's no risk of it running out. And in fact, people who missed it can apply for up to 3 years retroactively to get it. So hope that answers some questions.
Okay. Delegate Kaufman, do you still prefer that to ask your question when we get to the full bill?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Sounds good. Okay, so I think we're ready to vote on the amendments. All those in favor of the amendments, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Anyone opposed on the amendments? Okay, the amendments are adopted unanimously. Let's take a motion on the bill as amended.
So I move the bill as amended, Madam Chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Moved by Chair Foley, and sorry, I missed who the first person was, so we'll go with Delegate Kaiser because I recognized her voice as seconding. And now we'll have conversation on the bill as amended, recognizing Delegate Kaufman.
Yes. And I apologize if it's in the Google Drive. I just read so much every day, I might have missed it. But I'm just curious if the county executive, county council, or Office of Intergovernmental Relations have taken a position on the bill, and if so, what the position is.
Madam Chair, I can answer that if you'd like. Would you like me to answer that?
Yes, please.
Okay. The county council, the county executive supports the bill with the amendment. And the amendment actually was drafted in consultation with the county executive, and the county council did not take a position on the bill. Initially, I think later I did get an update from the county liaison that the county council now does support the bill as well.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you. And actually, I do have a question. Maybe this is best for the bill sponsor, Delegate Moon. One thing I was curious about under the bill language is that it says it can be a full or a partial exemption for the charge. How exactly would that get decided if it's going to be a full or a partial exemption? I guess, who makes that decision?
Well, there's a cap on how much you can get. And I forgive my ignorance on this. It's either 50 or 80,000 per project. And so if the system development charge exceeds that amount, you would only be a partial exemption.
I see. Okay. Thank you. That answers my question. Other questions or discussion on the bill as amended? Okay, seeing none.
And sorry, Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I may, just for the legislative record, because it's a little bit of a maze to figure out how this works. The 3-year entities who apply for this can get up to 3 years backwards in time retroactivity, and that's in I believe some section of the PSC code relates to when you can get a refund for these types of charges. There was a question. We are removing the requirement that the child care facilities own the land that they are using for childcare in order to get the exemption. That ownership requirement doesn't exist for the other project types, so this just makes it consistent. But it is my contention and belief that the county, when it sets an annual resolution every year defining with more clarity these processes, can in fact retroactively make entities eligible who did not previously qualify because they did not own the land. But I think with this change, we ought to be able to go 3 years back in time and make childcare centers who do not own their land eligible retroactively, and that could be done through the annual resolution. I just wanted to state that for the legislative record.
Thank you. That's an important point. Anything else before we vote? All right. All those in favor of the bill as amended, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that bill passes unanimously. Thank you, Chair Foley. Thank you to the Economic Development Committee for your work on these bills. We will turn next to the Land Use, Transportation, and Public Safety Committee, recognizing Chair Spiegel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. These are the final two bills on our committee's docket. Both were recommended unanimously by the committee as favorable with amendment. We will start with MC 1725. This bill allows the placement of speed monitoring systems, speed cameras, on highways in Montgomery County that are designated as high risk for vehicle crashes. The designation and the identification of which highways and areas on those highways are considered to be at high risk for vehicle crashes is keyed to certain formal plans, including Vision Zero plans that are adopted by local jurisdictions within the county or by the county itself, as well as the county's strategic highway safety plan. There is one minor amendment to expand that definition to include other local jurisdiction plans that essentially do the same thing by identifying other high-risk areas within a road safety plan, even if they don't call it a strategic highway safety plan or a Vision Zero plan. They might call it by another name, but it does the same thing. The bill also requires that the revenue collected from those monitoring systems be used to invest in improving safety at the locations or intersections on those high-risk highways that are identified as areas where crashes have resulted in serious bodily injuries or deaths. With that, I will move the amendment.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Delegate Spiegel, seconded by Delegate Kaufman. We'll move to discussion and questions on the amendment. Delegate Kaiser. You're good?
I mean, I think my question's on the full bill.
Okay, we'll come
So
back
thank
to you
you.
then. Thank you. Anything else on the amendments? Okay, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, the amendment is adopted unanimously. Let's take a motion on the bill as amended.
Move the bill as amended.
Second.
Moved by Delegate Spiegel, seconded by Delegate Kaufman, recognizing Delegate Kaiser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question for Chair Spiegel, understanding that we have speed cameras in the county, I kind of missed the point of why we needed this legislation to expand it to these other sites when, is it not allowed at those sites? I'm sorry that I missed that nuance.
Thank you for the question. There are a handful of sites that if you were to overlay these road safety plans over the locations where cameras are currently authorized within the county, there are a handful, I think about 7 or 8 maybe different sites that have been identified as high risk. that are not currently allowed to have cameras under the existing rules that apply to the county. Whether those rules, relate to proximity to a school or proximity to a residential area, those areas are not currently authorized for cameras. And if I may, Madam Chair, I'm happy to defer to Delegate Solomon if he has anything he wants to add on the answer to Delegate Kaiser's question.
Yes, go ahead, Delegate Solomon.
No, I was just going to say almost similar thing to Delegate Spiegel. There's a list of probably about 40 locations, Delegate Kaiser, that I can share with you that between being in a commercial area or the speed limit, the county or the MPD is not able to put automated enforcement on there, either county roads or state roads. And again, those are the highest injury locations. It's 41% of the serious and fatal crashes happens at these locations, even though it only makes up about 3% of the overall road network in the county.
Do you have any follow-up questions, Delegate Kaiser?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Solomon, the way you answered that question, that it's not just that they're not allowed to, but that they can't. Why is it that, is there a technological reason that they can't?
No,
It seems
no.
like-
So when they're saying not allowed to or they can't, so legally they can't put, you're not allowed to put a speed camera on a road with a speed limit over 35, under 35, and you're not allowed to put a camera in a commercial zone. And so there's a whole list of locations throughout the county where these have been the highest injury locations that either they fall in a commercial zone or the speed limit is under 35 and they can't put a camera currently. So this was a cleaner way in working with State Highway Administration, with our partners, to get locations without making sort of blanket changes to the law.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for those good clarifying questions. Other questions or discussion on the bill as amended? Okay, we will vote then. All those in favor of the bill as amended, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that bill passes unanimously. Chair Spiegel, for your other bill, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The last bill is MC 825. This is a bill that we saw last year that involves how the revenue collected from school bus cameras is distributed within the county. We did pass that bill last year, but some portions of it were removed when it finally got through the General Assembly. So the original bill as introduced this year would have required that the revenue collected be used to build median strips on 5 or 6 lane highways where bus stops currently exist and where there has been a significant number of violations of vehicles driving the opposite direction while the bus stop has its stop sign open and its red lights flashing, and folks aren't supposed to be crossing. That portion of the bill was removed by an amendment. So really what's left of the bill at this point, assuming that the full delegation committee adopts the amendment, would be to extend the deadline for the county to ensure that any bus stop where there have been at least 400 of these bus stop or school bus camera tickets issued in the previous fiscal year at that location have to have either a crossing guard or a traffic control device installed at that location where that bus stop is. Under the existing law passed last year, the deadline to get that done would be December of 2026. The school system and the county have expressed concern that that's too short of a time frame to be able to implement that. And so, assuming that the amendments are adopted by the delegation, this bill would essentially just extend that deadline to December of 2028, giving the county and the school system a couple more years to implement it and ensure that every one of those bus stop locations where there have been 400 or more of those tickets issued by the bus camera to have a crossing guard or a traffic control device there. And with that, I will move the amendments, Madam Chair.
Second.
Thank you. Amendments have been moved by Delegate Spiegel, seconded by Delegate Wims. Questions or discussion on the amendment? Okay, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, the amendments are adopted unanimously. Is there a motion on the bill as amended?
Move the bill as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Delegate Spiegel, seconded by Delegate Cullison. Discussion or questions on the bill as amended? Seeing none, all those in favor of MC 8-25 as amended, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that bill also passes unanimously. Thank you, Chair Spiegel. And we will turn to our last committee report for today for the Metro Area Washington Committee, Chair Miraku North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the Metro Washington Area Committee have one bill that passed out of committee, MCPG 11625, Montgomery County Municipal Authority to Regulate Structures Alterations. I thought it'd be best to kind of give a brief background as to what this bill is about, and I'm going to ask Delegate Solomon to go over the amendments to the bill. Essentially, a municipality or a governed special taxing district has the authority to impose an additional or restricting building requirement than is what's required by the state, regional, or county unit that exercises the zoning authority. The building requirement has to be imposed for protection of public health and safety and awareness, preservation, improvement, protection of land, water, and improvements in the municipal corporation or the actual taxing district. And it has to regulate only the construction, repair, or remodeling of single-family residential houses, buildings, or other structures on land zoned for single-family use related to fencing, walls, hedges, barriers, signs, residential parking and storage, as well as location and dimension of the structures and lot coverage. And so I'm going to refer to Delegate Solomon to go over the amendments that passed out of our committee, because I think it'd do a good job of explaining how we narrowed the scope of this bill. So go ahead, Delegate Solomon, take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman North, and thank you, colleagues. I wanted to start off by thanking, I know Jason Sartori from the Planning Board is still on in case questions come up. The Planning Board was a really wonderful partner on this over the last couple of weeks as we fine-tuned and refined the amendment, and want to thank Jen Young as well, who worked with us a lot on this, because some of what we proposed isn't necessarily in state statutes, so there was a lot of back and forth, and we were able to get to a really good place. So, to just kind of take you back and build off of what Delegate Miraku North said. So this is already existing law. And back in 2021, we got an AG's opinion on sort of how this law, which has been on the books since 2006, was being applied. And the Attorney General's ruling injected a tremendous amount of ambiguity into the law, and really kind of opened up the potential for municipalities to have, in some respects, almost unlimited authority over construction of buildings within their purview. And so what we've done here is really, with this bill, kind of narrowed the scope of that authority while creating some certainty for the municipalities. So the last thing, obviously, anybody wants in any sort of zoning or development is for things to be litigated to death. So, I think as many of you might remember from December, we sort of outlined that we had a bill, but we knew that the finer points were going to be kind of honing in on, it's really meant to be for structures with 4 units or less, which is sort of the by right development and the sort of smaller construction. This was never meant to be for things bigger than the 4, where you get into a very different process of development within the county and within the planning board. And so that's ultimately what we did with this amendment, was we narrowed the scope to clarify that the authority for municipalities is really meant to be for units, for buildings with 4 units or less. There is, again, language in this bill that makes it clear that, and this is an added constraint to the authority that was already on the books again since 2006, to make it clear that anything for multifamily units, again up to 4, cannot be more strict than what you have in place for single family homes. That again is something new that we've added in that is not in current law, is not a restriction that municipalities have to operate under. This applies to 12 municipalities. And I know there were some questions around Tacoma Park. There was a letter from the 11 municipalities, and then Tacoma Park was separate. We've talked with the mayor, and I know she's reached out to a couple of folks. Tacoma Park is comfortable with this amendment. It was supported unanimously by the council and supported unanimously by the planning board. So I think we reached a really good place here with sort of all the parties involved. And again, appreciate everybody's help in this.
Thank you. And I do see we're going to have some questions, but let's take a motion in a second on the amendments first.
I was going to say, move the amendments.
Second.
Okay. Amendments have been moved by Delegate Solomon, seconded by Delegate Miracle North, recognizing Delegate Chi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question for the bill sponsor is both related to the bill and the amendment. You might have implied in your last sentence about all parties agreeing to the changes, but I just specifically want to know the position of Municipal League. Do they have a position on this?
Yeah, Delegate Chief, that's a great question. So the local county municipal, the county MML chapter has been working with our municipalities on this. So the 12 municipalities that are impacted are Tacoma Park, and then it's Kensington, Garrett Park, Somerset, Glen Echo, Martin's Addition, and then all of the Chevy Chases. So everybody is comfortable with this. And there should be a letter from 11 of the municipalities who were fully in support of this. And then again, Tacoma Park told us they're comfortable with the amendment language.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Chi. Other questions or discussion on the amendments? Delegate Moon.
I'm sorry. I kind of need the sponsor to explain this to me like I'm an idiot. So if we accept this amendment now, if the county has certain rules, where can the municipalities diverge from what the county has done?
So, Delegate Moon, that's an excellent question. So, to be clear, the municipalities under current law can basically do whatever they want. So, if a municipality tomorrow wanted to regulate a building potentially with 5 units or more, they could theoretically have that authority given the way the Attorney General has interpreted the current law. And so what this amendment does is essentially clarify existing code, that the authority that municipalities are supposed to have is really only for these smaller buildings, again, within the constraints of what the planning board has proposed and what we've discussed with them. And then again, we are adding an additional authority here into this bill that is not in current law, so that if we don't move this bill forward, this is not on the books, that whatever changes they were to make or restrictions or requirements they put in place for multifamily housing has to be identical, can't be any more restrictive than what is on single family homes. And again, using the town of Kensington as an example, they already have multiple. I mean, Kensington's got high-rise apartments, they have townhomes, they have low-rise apartments. The part of the reason why this was so complex to draw or to put together was there are a lot of different sort of layers of zonings that were in existence for decades but don't exist anymore. So like the town of Kensington has a floating townhouse zone that we didn't realize existed until we got into the nitty-gritty. So this is just sort of, again, clarifying existing authority, putting some additional constraints on existing authority, and removing some of the ambiguity over the Attorney General's opinion from 2021.
So if I understand the frame of the bill, it is alleged that under current law, municipalities can junk county rules on siting and things like this, but none of them have actually exercised this power. Is that also a fair statement? That it's a theoretical?
No, I mean, so if you're coming at it from the perspective of a municipality is going to prevent them from coming in, then the answer is
have they actually used this power?
Yeah, so again, I would use Kensington as a great example. So, Kensington they have used this authority on the various types of zoning and the various types of housing that they have there. And again, Kensington, of these other municipalities, Kensington and Tacoma Park are probably the two that are most emblematic of sort of a mixture of housing.
Well, I guess the specific question is, are municipalities currently using this power to be more restrictive than the county?
I don't know that I would. I mean, Jason's sort of shaking his head in a sense, yes. But again, it hasn't prevented that housing from coming in. And Jason, I don't know.
Can we defer to Mr. Sartori to maybe provide some more information on that point?
Sure. Thank you. For the record, Jason Sartori, Planning Director. Yes, to answer Delegate Moon's question, I think municipalities are currently using this. So one of the, as an example, they can apply stricter setback standards than we apply through county zoning. So in some cases, they've chosen to do that. And this bill does is it ensures that any setback that they apply to a single family home would be the same that they would apply to a duplex or a triplex, that they can apply a stricter one to a duplex or a triplex to basically ensure that they're not feasible. If they did it for a duplex or a triplex, they'd also have to do it for a single family home.
And some of them might find that a worthy trade, right? To further restrict single family in order to constrain the duplexes and townhomes, and they'd be able to do so more restrictive than what the county's doing for single family.
Well, so to be clear, Delegate Moon, they have that authority right now. So what Jason just mentioned, what I had outlined, that is something new that we're adding in. A municipality could do whatever they wanted. If they wanted to tomorrow, they could say you required an 80-foot setback for a duplex under current law.
And they're currently doing this with single family. They're applying more restrictive setbacks than exist for the county single family.
Yeah, so you can take them.
Okay.
I mean, in
Yeah,
some
so
respects,
some cases
yes.
they can- yeah.
And they have that authority. And they could, tomorrow, again, they could make a much more restrictive setback for a duplex or a triplex than they have for single family.
Could. And I guess you're arguing that the trade is that they have a theoretical ability right now to do this for things beyond single family, and that this amended bill would remove any question about that?
Correct.
Have we had so, and I gather, does park and planning support this? Yes, and what about folks with a stake in affordable housing construction and the like? Have they weighed in on, I guess, this?
So the folks from Greater Washington testified that they were neutral on the bill. And you have Dan Reed's letter.
And I would add, we didn't hear from any other groups.
I was going to say there
when
was
the bill
no
was
other
in committee.
opposition during the hearing or since then.
Yeah. And sorry, so if we don't pass this bill, what happens is that we have a countywide rule about what those setbacks and heights are, right?
No. So current law on the books essentially gives these 12 municipalities a complete blank check on what they do. So this is not a new creation.
Yeah.
Current law has been on the books since 2006, adopted by this delegation, adopted by members of Montgomery County. We are trying to work we have worked collaboratively with, again, the planning board, the county, and with these municipalities to come up with something that is a restriction and a constraint on that current law. If we pass nothing, there is nothing stopping municipalities other than the courts from doing what you outlined, which again, we have worked in partnership with all of our municipalities, and again, Kensington in particular has a wide range of housing types. So this is not meant to restrict housing. It's meant to, also protect the authority that municipalities have been using for 20 years, because there's a potential that if this ambiguity continues, what they've already been doing could be challenged as well.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman Kuhnarth, did you want to weigh in on this point before I go to Delegate Spiegel?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that recently we got clarification that not only did the county council unanimously approve this, I think before we voted on Monday, but the county executive did as well. And given their efforts on creating more affordable housing, I can tell you that weighed heavily on me before we voted on Monday, and why I'll be in support of the bill this morning. But I definitely hear Delegate Moon's concern, which is why it's taken several weeks for us to get to a point of voting on it. And I appreciate the planning board working diligently with Delegate Solomon, because they too are in the business of creating affordable housing. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that I definitely share Delegate Moon's concerns, but I definitely know that they've been working hard to try to find a middle ground on this issue.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask for Delegate Spiegel's patience for a moment longer and just weigh in on this point too, and say, Delegate Moon, I was honestly pretty skeptical of the bill as we heard it several months ago, and really do appreciate how much work Delegate Solomon has put into the amendments. And I did vote for the amendments in committee and for the bill as amended, and will be today as well. Delegate Spiegel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just quickly, I think we all know the answer to this question, but for the record, I wanted to just make clear that this does not apply to those municipalities within the county who have independent zoning and land use jurisdiction. Isn't that so?
Yes. Thank you, Delegate Spiegel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or discussion on the amendments? Okay, then we will vote. So folks can come back on camera, please, if you want to be recorded. All those in favor of the amendments, please say aye or raise your hand. Anyone opposed?
I'm sorry, I'm in favor. I just couldn't get off mute fast enough.
No worries. Anyone opposed on the amendments? Okay, so the amendments are adopted. Is there a motion on the bill as amended?
Move favorable.
Second.
Madam Chair, second. Sorry.
Moved by Delegate Kaufman, seconded by Delegate Solomon. Discussion on the bill as amended. Seeing none, all those in favor of the bill as amended, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that bill also passes unanimously, and I should just note for the record, Delegate Shetty is excused on these last two bills that we have voted on and their amendments. Okay, thank you very much, Chair Miracoon North, and for the work of your committee this week. Last thing on the agenda, we'll turn to committee announcements, if any chairs would like to mention when their next meeting will be. No forthcoming dates?
Well,
Sorry, Madam Chair. I was trying to reserve my voice, as you can tell. The Metro Washington Area Committee will be meeting hopefully next Monday, 6:30, but stay tuned for the agenda.
Thank you. Recognizing Chair Ziegler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Education, Elections, and Housing Subcommittee will meet on February 17th at 11 o'clock in the morning on Zoom. Thank you.
it's a new time.
And that's, yes, flagging, that is a new
Yes,
date and
thank you.
time for that local committee. And I believe, Chair Ziegler, that's going to be your new standing time going forward.
Yes, it will. Hopefully it will. It's been very hard to find a time, but so far that seems to be the best we can do. So yes,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Yes, Chair Spiegel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a reminder that the Land Use, Transportation, and Public Safety Committee will not meet next week or for the rest of the session. We are done with our docket. You do not have to show up. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chair Foley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Economic Development Committee does not have a meeting scheduled at this time. It will be at the call of the chair, depending upon when we hear from Prince George's County on another bi-county bill, which is the only bill we have left. Thank you.
Yes, and on that point, we do have a few bills that originated in the Prince George's County delegation that are bi-county bills that have not come over to us yet. And I don't remember off the top of my head exactly how many committees are impacted by that, but I know it's several of them. So there may be more bills forthcoming that just are not in our hands yet at this time. Any other announcements before we adjourn? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, everybody. Good work today. See you on the floor soon. We're adjourned.